Jesus Masi. I'd like to also extend a thank you to Guampedia for putting this all together. I think it's very important that we keep these stories alive, especially following liberation and kind of a change in how we commemorate this year. Yeah, so Guahu si Nolan Flores, Nanahu si Hilary Tovis Flores. So the Tovis is my grandpa's side, and that's Familia Bezesta from Assam. And then the Flores is Familia Bonnet from Zotnia. So Tata Zotnia, so yeah. Next slide, please. Oh, okay, sorry, back. I guess it didn't show up. Okay, there we go. Okay. Yes, so this is my grandma on my mother's side, Ana Rivera Tovis, so born in 1952. And the stories that I'm going to share today are some of the stories. My experiences are mostly from her talking with her. I'm very close to her. And then this is her father, Jesus Rosario Rivera, so born in 1913. And then this is her mother, Herminia Taisapik, Taitung Fung Taisapik Rivera, also born in 1913. So with my grandma, when I asked her about some of her Nana stories, right? She explained that there wasn't really much, and that they were few and far between. She never really shared stories about the war or what pre-war stuff. There were some moments, some things that she talked about. They were very specific things, like how they moved. They lived in the cave during the war. The Japanese would come. They'd take the chickens, take the things that were farmed and stuff. Or I think the most I got from her in terms of stories was the walk to Menengen. She shared that, and of course this is indirect. This is coming from her Nana, so she's sharing that with me. And then I asked her specifically about liberation, and it surprised me that she said her Nana never really discussed the actual day of liberation with her. So that's kind of a gap in her knowledge of what happened. And the stories that my grandma did share from her Nana were very there was a common theme, and it was struggle, sacrifice, and perseverance. And that kind of surprised me. I was kind of expecting maybe like American patriotism or gratitude to the Americans to make up the stories that my grandma shared with me, but it was more about our people and her family, and uh, what her Nana went through, rather than the big day, right? Liberation Day. So then I asked her if she celebrated Liberation Day as a child, and again I was surprised when she said that it wasn't really a big deal to her growing up, because when we look at pictures of the past, it would make it seem like it was a major celebration for all Chamorro families, right? Yeah, so that was surprising to hear that she didn't really celebrate it as a child, and it wasn't celebrated by her mom. So I guess it's mostly a focus on their struggles during the war. And I then posed the question. This was just yesterday. I posed the question: should we still celebrate liberation today? And her answer surprised me again. She said, not really. And I was like, I was a little thrown off by that. And and then she just said, today it's hard with decolonization and everything. And that surprised me. I was like, what the heck? If I would have asked her that last year, or if I would have mentioned decolonization, like let's say last year, she would have brushed it off and said, boy, don't do that stuff. It's not going anywhere, right? So yeah, that really surprised me. And the same is true of language. In the past, when I would ask her what something means in Chamorro or how to say it in Chamorro, she would laugh, or she would say, why are you asking that? What do you need that for? But as she came to understand that I was interested in the language, that I actually wanted to learn, and it wasn't just phrases just to use once. It was wanting to learn the language and be able to converse with her. She's become a lot more receptive. There's less resistance to it, and she's starting to speak to me fully in the language. So yeah, I think I'm gonna reference this experience with her a lot as I move on. Yeah. So I mentioned talking about the disconnect of my generation from the stories and sentiments and people of the past. And I won't say that I speak for my entire generation, but I can share my personal experiences and that of my peers. And I think that although we know a lot of the stories, we hear them, we read about them, there is a disconnect. We don't feel the strong sentiments that many of the past generation feel, like my grandma or even my grandparents. And I think because of that, we also don't celebrate liberation in the same way. We see a lot of this past year, we you don't see the youth really celebrating. Even on social media, you don't see things of Happy Liberation Day. We get thrown off when we hear things like Happy Liberation Day. We say, how do we respond to that, right? It's not a it's weird for us to celebrate in a sense, I think. And then yeah, I think we've begun to question why we celebrate liberation, especially my generation. I know it's been happening for generations past, but more so, there's a lot more discussion, I think, among our generation, the youth, the Manhoban, asking, why are we celebrating the Americans today when the role they played in taking our lands and, hurting our cultural aspects and our language and stuff like that. And they're very uncomfortable questions. But I do think the answers lie in the stories that our Manana have. And those are the stories that we do have and that we can draw upon. And they're stories of struggle and stories of perseverance. But yeah, it's understandable through these stories why our grandparents, our great grandparents, have this sense of loyalty to the United States that would cause them to say things like, never mind about that decolonization or what. Yeah. And I think these stories still need to be valued. These perspectives of loyalty and patriotism still need to be valued, just because it's their experience. They feel that way, yeah. And I also think there's a way to highlight the stories while also challenging our continued colonization and the militarization of our island. And we need to really continue the discussion on alternate commemorations. I think we discussed it a lot, and we're all kind of afraid, the disrespect that might come with it. We're very hesitant. We don't want to say that we're not honoring the struggles of our people, but we feel that disconnect. We don't celebrate liberation in the same way that some of the past generation might. And I think these discussions, the way that we choose to commemorate alternatively, they need to incorporate everyone, both our Manhoban and our Manyayna. And I guess going back to the thing about the patriotism and the loyalty to the United States, I wouldn't say it's entirely the fault of our Manyayna for adopting those sentiments, right? I think it was a part of American colonization, the fact that they kind of took our people. So like you went through this morning with the recap, it evolved from small celebrations, right, like village celebrations, mass celebrations, into this more large scale thing. And I how do I explain it? Just the way that the Americans kind of pushed that narrative on us that they were the saviors, and maybe they were, but the way that they used our people, like how, if we look at, it was Chamorro women that were used as symbols of Americanism, right? And of course, the Chamorro people aren't gonna shy away from celebrating our own people, but the things that were associated with them, the Americanism, I think that's kind of where the younger generation kind of feels that disconnect. Yeah, and it's also things, the flyover of U.S. planes, the dropping of the American flag. Those things just don't resonate well with me personally or many of my peers. Yeah. So then the question becomes, I think, how can we balance honoring the perseverance of our people while also sort of reliberating ourselves and maybe amending past perceptions? And then just going back to my conversation with my grandma, I think it stands as a good example of the change that is possible with how we celebrate liberation, or whether or not we celebrate liberation at all, and rather just switch to more commemorating the stories of our Manyayna, while also evolving concepts of American patriotism into celebrations of our people's struggle and perseverance, and kind of returning to that more intimate connection with the actual lived experiences rather than these big celebrations of the American return, I think. Yeah. And I know there are some that might say in order to move forward with issues like decolonization and self-determination that we need to leave behind our generation of elders that still have those pro-American sentiments. And some might say they're stuck in the past, but I really disagree with that. I think that in my experience, our Manana are they're very willing and they're eager to be a part of the conversations, the more difficult conversations of today. And they need to be, rightfully so. And as I've seen with my grandma, who used to criticize me when I asked how to say something in Chamorro, or when I discuss things about decolonization, it is possible for them to come and understand the feelings and desires of the newer generation. And I think they need to be a part of that journey, just as they've been throughout our whole history, the hardest parts of our history, in fact. And we must draw strength from them. Yeah. And I think changes in commemoration that focus more on the individual struggles or the collective struggles of our people, rather than the American battle for Guam, will go a long way in mending that disconnect that exists between my generation and past generations. So celebrations that focus more on our people and ourselves, what we have inside of us, what we've gained from our sign, will empower those of my generation to continue moving forward things of decolonization, language, and cultural revitalization, while also keeping alive the stories and honoring Armeniana themselves. Yeah, si Diyos masi.
Si Diyos masi, Nolan. Again, you just reinforced for me again one of the gratifying things that I've always enjoyed about listening to young people and teaching young people in the classroom is that we tend to learn a lot more from you than you will ever learn from us as educators. So thank you for showing that. I think you really bring to the foreground. It's a good way to kind of bring our back kitchen table toward a conclusion. This idea that you're right, for a long time, there's this suffocating narrative in every history textbook that you're going to pick up about Guam, that liberation is this story of American military heroism that is upheld by stories of the tragic Chamorro victim, who is forever going to be grateful for what the United States did in liberating us. That's the story, right? But I think what you point out and what the work of all of you at this back kitchen table have pointed out is that if we give our manana a chance to be heard beyond that narrative, we'll find so much more. In my own research, I remember asking elders, what do you think of liberation? And their immediate answer was, yes, we love America. They saved us. When I was gonna die in Menengan, they were gonna kill me. And a handsome, tall soldier with blue eyes carried me out of the jungle and gave me chocolate. You will hear that narrative from every World War II survivor. And most researchers have stopped there and gotten their publications out of that narrative. But if you sit long enough and give our elders a chance to be heard, as you point out, we'll find so much more. I remember interviewing Rita's mother when she was alive, and she looked at me. And in the same way that your elder said, you know, maybe we shouldn't be really celebrating liberation, Rita's mother profoundly told me liberation is not for the Chamorro people. They want Guam for their base. And so it challenged for me that this powerful narrative, right, of American heroes and Chamorro victims. Now, I think what we need to be mindful of, as you point out, Nolan, as all of you point out, is yes, our people were grateful. Yes, there are very true stories of heroism among individual military servicemen who did put their life on the line, and many of them lost their lives to liberate our island. That is true, but it does not dismiss the historic and ongoing injustices that have come with liberation and that are a price that our people are still paying today. And so it is messy and complex, and I think all of you today point out that it is not a story or a war of this narrative or that narrative. Right, favoring one thing over the other is not going to do our community any good, but respecting the different spaces that we occupy at different times and in different contexts, I think, Nolan, as you point out and many others do, that's the way forward. We're not necessarily advocating for throwing out the celebration of liberation, but perhaps transforming how we celebrate it, right? So that that liberation becomes a platform to fully appreciate the past and learn from it in ways that kind of help us highlight the stories while challenging these ongoing historic wrongs. As you say, to continue the discussions respectfully, critically, with an open mind, and with the understanding that whatever uncomfortable spaces we cross, because there are going to be uncomfortable spaces, there are going to be fights. But if we can understand those uncomfortable spaces as the terrain that we need to cross in the interest of our survival and in the interest of the continuity and of our people and the lessons of our mañana, then I think you're absolutely right. This is the way forward in the 21st century as far as remembering liberation and what we can learn from it. So with that being said, I do want to turn it over to Rita to talk about where are we going with this back kitchen table moving forward? Where have we been and what can we look forward to? Thank you.
Jesus Masi Lazin, Jesus Masi to all of our visita. I guess, you know, I was texting James because I said, oh, we're way past our back kitchen schedule, but as in all back kitchen productions, we can just keep going and keep talking. And a lot of really heartfelt perspectives that were shared around our kusinan, our lamasa today. And although Guam's Liberation Day commemorations have ended, you can continue to learn and make meaningful connections from our mañana. And if you no longer can hear these stories directly from them, through Guampedia's website, you still have that opportunity. We have this whole section, Fanhasu War for Guam, and it's really giving that perspective, those stories. We currently have about 52 stories from our mañana, and we have an overview of the war. We actually have a map of the sites, the 22 memorial sites and places within that commemorate this time. And this year, what we've done on Guampedia is we've added the names of the World War II list of Chamorro deaths and survivors in Guam. The United States kept really great track of the number of Marines and military that died. Japan took really great record of their casualties and their injuries, but who recorded the Chamorros? And so, excuse me. So now the wall, the names that are up on the wall at the Assen Bay Overlook at the Guam Museum, you can now actually see those names on Guampedia.com. And those names, those lists are not complete. The stories, we haven't heard a lot of the stories. And like Saina Malia said, this is a living history. It has not come to pass. There are still a lot of issues. There are still a lot of stories that we need to recover, that we need to document, we need to access. And so that's part of the reason why history is so important, because it gives us continuity. It connects us through stories of shared past. And so through our conversations, we have re-envisioned our World War II survivors as warriors and their experiences and wisdom as relevant to contemporary community issues and concerns that we're facing today. Although this concludes our inaugural Culture of Connecting program series, Guampedia, with our community partners, will be hosting more Back Kitchen programs. So we would like to hear from you, and as to some of the topics that you'd like to share, like to feature. All you have to do, our history, Guam's history is so amazing, spanning 4,000 years. And so there's so much that we can continue to share in our virtual Back Kitchen. And it wouldn't be possible without all our partners, the University of Guam, the College of Business, College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences, see James Viernes from the University of Hawaii, Manoa, Shannon Murphy, Baltazar Aguon, Jay Castro, our Saina Tony Malia Ramirez, and all of our special guests, our visita today and in our prior sessions, and our staff, Natalie Pareda and Lazaro Canatas, is Masi for all your hard work, and most especially to our guests, especially the 20 of you that are still with us despite our extensive conversation. Sizuos Maasi for joining us. And it is our hope that during your time in our kusinan sanhiyong, we have served you stories and ways to make connections from our past to talani or guide you during these uncertain times. Sizuos Maasi, Sanis Yes, and yes, Guam Preservation Trust. We cannot not mention Guam Preservation Trust, especially with Joe smiling right at us. Sizus Maasi Malia. But again, Dankuna Sizus Maasi. Do you want to say anything, Malia?
Oh, Guay naman ako, there's a saying among the elders, Putodi Pinatinas, which simply means Putodi Pinatinas, all that has transpired in our history. I would always hear that in whatever experience that they had gone through. My life, when it comes to an end, would be Putodi Pinatinas. That's the Inano journey of everyone. To do smasi todos.
Adios, Estaki.